I made a mistake once. Not the kind you forget after a good night's sleep. The kind that follows you into every quiet room. Every Sunday morning when the house is too still and the coffee goes cold before you remember to drink it. I trusted the wrong person with the truth about my life. And that person was my own son. I want to be clear about something before I tell you what happened. I am not a bitter man. I spent 34 years as a structural engineer in Charlotte, North Carolina. I built bridges. Not the metaphorical kind, real ones. The kind that hold 18-wheelers and school buses and ambulances. I understand load-bearing capacity. I understand what happens when you place too much weight on a structure that was never designed to carry it. I understand this better than most people. And yet somehow I did not see it coming when my own family decided to test exactly how much I could hold. My wife passed away 11 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. 12 weeks from diagnosis to the end. She was 54 years old, and she had the most organized sock drawer I have ever seen in my life. I say that because it's the kind of small, specific thing that tells you everything about a person. She was careful. She was thoughtful. She planned ahead. She taught me to do the same. And so when I retired at 61, I had done everything right. I had a paid-off house in a quiet neighborhood outside Charlotte. I had my pension. I had Social Security beginning in a few years. And I had savings money I had put away for 30-plus years, carefully, consistently, the way my wife would have wanted. My son was the good part of everything that came after losing her. He looks like her. Same dark eyes, same way of tilting his head slightly to the left when he's thinking hard about something. He was 32 when he met his girlfriend at a company retreat in Asheville. She was 30, a marketing manager, sharp and funny at first. I liked her. I want to say that plainly because what I'm about to tell you is not a story about a man who never gave his daughter-in-law a fair chance. I gave her every chance. I brought flowers to their apartment the first time I was invited for dinner. I flew to her parents' home in Connecticut for the engagement party, even though my knees were already starting to complain about long travel. I danced at their wedding. I gave a toast. I meant every word of it. Her parents were pleasant people. Her father had retired from investment banking. Her mother sat on 2 nonprofit boards and wore the kind of clothes that don't have visible price tags. They drove a car that cost more than my first house. At the rehearsal dinner, her father ordered a bottle of wine that the waiter handled like it was made of something other than glass. They were, by any reasonable measure, wealthy, significantly more wealthy than I was. This will matter later. The wedding was in September. 2 years after they met. Beautiful venue, a restored farmhouse with string lights and a barn, and all of those things that look like a magazine and cost like a mortgage. They had asked both sets of parents to contribute. I gave $25,000. My son told me her parents gave 15. I remember raising an eyebrow at that. Her father had just mentioned, at the cocktail hour, that he was remodeling their lake house. I said nothing. It was their wedding day. 18 months after the wedding, my son called me on a Tuesday evening. I was on my back porch watching the light change. He said he had news. They had found a house. I asked where. He said a neighborhood I knew well, one of the newer developments on the north side of Charlotte. The kind with wide streets and a pond with a fountain and houses that photograph beautifully from the street. I asked how much. He paused just a half-second too long before he answered, $940,000. I set my coffee mug down on the porch railing very carefully. I asked him to repeat the number. He did. I asked him what their combined income was. He said around $160,000 a year. I did the math without a calculator because I spent 3 decades doing math under pressure, and what I came up with was a monthly mortgage payment at the rates that existed at that moment, somewhere between $6,000 and $7,000 a month, before taxes and insurance, and the HOA fee he mentioned almost in passing. I told him I thought that was a lot of house. He said they had looked at the numbers. He said his wife's salary had room to grow. He said the neighborhood was appreciating. He said all the things people say when they have already decided and are now simply informing you rather than asking your opinion. I asked if her parents were helping with the down payment. He said they were contributing what they could. I asked what that meant in dollars. He said $50,000. They needed $200,000 for the down payment they had in mind. Her parents were covering 50. My son and my daughter-in-law had saved 42,000 between them in 3 years of marriage, which, given their income and their lifestyle, the vacations I saw on social media, the renovation they had just done on their current apartment, the car my daughter-in-law had leased was honestly more than I expected. That left roughly $108,000 short of their goal. My son had not called to share news. My son had called to ask me a question he had not yet asked out loud. I told him I would think about it. He thanked me. We talked about other things for a while. The Hornets. A hiking trail he had done the weekend before. Normal things. After we hung up, I sat on that porch until it was fully dark. I thought about my wife. I thought about what she would have said. I knew exactly what she would have said, actually. She would have asked one question first. Can they afford it without help? And when the answer was clearly no, she would have said, then we do not help them buy it. We might help them buy something else, something they can carry on their own. I did not have that conversation with my son right away. I waited 2 weeks, hoping he might bring it up again and give me a natural opening. He didn't. So I called him. I told him I had thought carefully about it. I told him I was not going to contribute to the down payment on that specific house. I told him why not in a cold or clinical way, but honestly, the way a father should be honest. I told him that a $940,000 home on $160,000 a year was not a sound financial decision, and that me covering the gap would not fix that. It would only delay the moment when they had to face it. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Dad, I thought you'd want to help us. I told him I did want to help him. I told him that was exactly why I was saying no. He said he understood. He said they would figure it out. The call ended cordially. I thought we were fine. We were not fine. For the next 3 weeks, every time we talked, something was slightly different in his voice. A kind of distance that hadn't been there before. He was still polite. He still called. But the warmth was dialed down a few degrees. The way a room feels different when someone cracks a window without saying anything. Then my daughter-in-law called me directly. She had never done that before, not without my son on the line. She was pleasant at first. She asked how I was doing. She asked about my knee, which I had mentioned was bothering me. I appreciated that. And then, smoothly, and without any visible transition, she began talking about the house. She said they had run the numbers again. She said that with my contribution of $100,000, the number had changed. I noticed their monthly payment would be completely manageable. She said she and my son both worked hard. She said they had big plans. She said that this house was not just a house, it was a foundation. She used that word specifically. A foundation. I am a structural engineer. I know what foundations are for. I know that a foundation built on borrowed capacity is not a foundation. It is a delay. I told her, as gently as I could, what I had told my son. She listened, and when I finished, she said something I have not forgotten. She said, I just want to be sure you understand that my parents have already committed what they're able to. They have obligations we may not be fully aware of. I sat with that for a second. Her parents, who had just remodeled a lake house, her parents, whose investment banking, retirement, and nonprofit board lifestyle suggested that obligations did not mean what she was implying. But I kept my voice even. I said, I understood. I said the answer was still no. The call ended. I poured myself a glass of water and stood at the kitchen sink looking at the backyard. Something had just changed. I didn't know yet how much. 6 weeks later, my son stopped calling. Not abruptly, the calls just spaced out, then stopped. I called him twice. He answered both times, was brief, said he was busy. My daughter-in-law stopped texting the occasional photo of their dog, which had been her version of staying in contact. The silence settled in like weather. They bought the house anyway. Smaller down payment, larger loan, higher monthly payment. I found out not because my son told me, but because I drove past the address he had mentioned. I'm not proud of that, but I drove past and saw a moving truck. 4 months after they moved in, I received a letter. It was from an attorney. I read it twice standing in my hallway with my coat still on. My son and my daughter-in-law were filing a civil claim against me. The claim alleged that I had made a verbal promise at their wedding reception to provide financial support for their future home. The claim cited a specific amount, $200,000. It further claimed that I had willfully withheld this promised support, causing measurable financial harm. They were seeking damages. The number on the letter was $400,000. I sat down on the stairs inside my front door. I am 63 years old. I have never been sued in my life. My name has been on permits and inspections and structural reports for over 3 decades, and no one has ever brought a legal action against me. And the first time someone did, it was my son. I want to tell you what I felt in that moment because I think it matters. I did not feel rage. I felt something colder and quieter than rage. I felt a particular kind of sadness that does not have a clean name in English. The kind that comes from seeing something you loved clearly for the first time and not being sure you like what you see. I called my attorney the next morning. She had handled my wife's estate and a property dispute years ago, and she was someone I trusted completely. I explained the situation. She listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I appreciate about her. When I finished, she asked me one thing. Did you make any promise, verbal or written, at any time, to provide money for a home? I told her no. She said, "Good. Then we respond. I will not walk you through every detail of the legal process, because it took 8 months, and most of it was paperwork and waiting, which is what legal processes mostly are. What I will tell you is that my daughter-in-law's family hired their own attorney, a fact that became relevant later, and that certain things emerged during the discovery process that reframed the story in ways I had not expected. It turned out that my daughter-in-law had, in the months before they bought the house, told several people her sister, a close friend, a co-worker, that her father-in-law had promised to help them out significantly with the purchase. She had said this before I had even been asked, before my son's phone call on that Tuesday evening on the porch, before any conversation had taken place at all. She had told people I had made a promise before I had been given the chance to either make it or refuse it. When my attorney presented this during the proceedings, there was a particular silence in the room. The kind of silence that means everyone is recalculating. The hearing was in front of a judge in Mecklenburg County. I had never been in a courtroom for anything more serious than jury duty, and that was 20 years ago. I wore the gray suit I keep for funerals and serious occasions. My son was at the plaintiff's table. He would not look at me when I came in. My daughter-in-law sat beside him in a dark blazer, her expression carefully neutral. Her attorney had a leather folder. My attorney had a legal pad, and the kind of calm confidence that comes from knowing exactly where this is going. The judge reviewed the filings. He asked a few procedural questions. He reviewed the deposition excerpts. He looked at the timeline. He reviewed the communications, the text messages, the phone records, the documented dates of every conversation. And then he looked directly at me. Not at my attorney, at me. He said, "Mr. Henderson, I have one question for you." The room was very quiet. He said, "At any point, in any form, did you commit to providing financial support for this property?" I said, "No, Your Honor. I did not." He looked down at the documents in front of him. He looked at the plaintiff's table. He said, "The court finds no evidence of a contractual verbal agreement. There is no written documentation. There are no contemporaneous communications supporting the plaintiff's claim. What the record does show is a pattern of expectation that was communicated to third parties before any agreement was sought, let alone reached." He dismissed the case. My daughter-in-law's attorney said something quietly to her. My son stared at the table. My attorney touched my arm briefly, not dramatically, just a small acknowledgement that it was over. I did not feel triumphant. I want to be honest about that. I walked out of that building into a gray November afternoon, and I sat in my car in the parking garage for a long time without starting the engine. My son had sued me. A judge had just ruled in my favor. And somewhere in that courthouse was my son, who looked like his mother, and I did not know when or whether I would speak to him again. There are things I learned during those 8 months that I wish I had known earlier, and I am going to share them with you because I think they matter. I learned that my daughter-in-law's parents, the ones with the lake house and the investment banking retirement, had in fact been asked for significantly more than $50,000. They had declined. Their reasoning, according to what came out later, was that they did not believe the house was a sound investment, and they did not want to be financially involved. They had said this privately to their daughter, and she had said nothing about it to my son. He had been told simply that her parents could not give more. He had believed her. My son did not know, for a significant portion of our conflict, that his wife's family had made the same decision I had, for nearly the same reasons, and had simply not told him. When he found this out not from me, but from his sister-in-law during an argument that apparently had nothing to do with any of this, something shifted. I don't know the details of what happened between them after that. I know that 6 months after the court dismissed the case, my son called me. It was a Sunday morning, early. I was on my back porch with coffee. He did not start with hello. He said, "Dad, I owe you something." I said, "You can start with a conversation." He said he was sorry. Not in the quick, transactional way people apologize when they want something. He was sorry in the way that takes a long time to say and keeps stopping and starting. He told me he had let someone else's version of events become his own. He told me he had been told things that weren't accurate and that he had not questioned them the way he should have. He told me he had believed the worst about me when I had spent his entire life giving him no reason to. I listened. He said his marriage was not in a good place. He said he was not asking me for anything, money or otherwise. He said he just needed me to know that he understood what had happened and that it was not something he could ever fully make right. But he wanted to try. I asked if he was okay. He said not entirely, but he was working on it. We talked for an hour and 40 minutes. I know because I looked at my phone when we finished and noted the time, the way you note the time of something significant. We talked about his mother. We talked about the bridge project I had done the year before she got sick, a pedestrian bridge over a creek in Gaston County that I was prouder of than almost anything I had built. We talked about his job, which he was thinking about leaving. We talked about a lot of things. I did not bring up the lawsuit. He did not ask about my finances. Some conversations do not need to cover everything in one sitting. I want to tell you now the thing that I think matters most. The thing I would go back and change if I could go back at all. Not the lawsuit. Not the house. Not any of the numbers. I would not have told my son what I had saved. Not because I was ashamed of it. Not because he didn't deserve to know his father was secure. But because the moment he knew, it changed something. It changed what he thought he was entitled to. It changed what his wife thought she was owed. It changed the way they looked at no, not as a thoughtful decision made for their own good, but as a withholding, as selfishness, as a man sitting on a pile of money and refusing to share it. When you are a parent, your financial security is yours. It is your retirement. It is your medical care. It is your ability to live with dignity in the years when your body stops cooperating. You are not an ATM. You are not a safety net for decisions other people made without consulting you. You are a person who spent decades building something for yourself, and that something belongs to you. The day my son called to tell me they had bought the house, I should have said congratulations, and I should have left it there. I should not have explained myself in terms of my own financial position. I should simply have said, "That's not something I'm going to do." Full stop. The reasons were mine to keep. I am 64 now. My knee is worse. My back porch is still my favorite place in the world, particularly in the late afternoon when the light comes through the oaks at a low angle and everything looks like it is being seen for the last time, in a good way. My son comes for dinner most Sundays. He is separated, working through what comes next. He coaches a youth soccer league on Saturday mornings, and he calls me after every game, win or lose. We are building something. I do not know what to call it yet. It is not what we had before, because you cannot go back to before. But it is real. It is load-bearing. It was designed from honest materials. His mother would have been patient with both of us. She would have kept her sock drawer organized and said very little and been right about everything. I try to honor that when I can. I have not changed my will. I have not punished him financially for what happened. Not because I owe him anything, but because punishment was never the point. The point was always that he learned to carry his own weight. The point was always that he becomes someone strong enough to hold what his life requires. I think he is getting there. I think the load is teaching him something. That is what bridges are for, in the end. Not to carry what's easy, to carry what's heavy, to hold it steadily, for a long time, without collapse. I was not wrong to say no. I was not wrong to love him anyway. And if I am wrong about anything, if I missed something, got something backwards, failed him in a way I haven't yet understood, I want him to tell me on a Sunday, on my porch, with coffee, with time enough to sit in the silence afterward and let it mean something. That is the only kind of conversation worth having. If any part of this story sounds like something you have lived or are living right now, I want you to know you are not alone in it. The hardest word a parent can say is also sometimes the most loving one. No is not the end of something. No, said clearly and with love, is sometimes the very thing that makes a beginning possible. Take care of yourselves. I'll see you next time.